And I'm delighted that Dr. dAbrera, our next speaker, has accepted our invitation to come. I've been chasing her for 3 years to get her here and finally got her here this week, and I'm really delighted. Bella is the Director Foundations of Western Civilisation program at the Institute of Public Affairs. They're based in Melbourne. She's based here in Sydney, but they're one of our premier centre-right think tanks. She has a BA in History and Spanish from Monash University and an MA in Spanish from the University of St Andrews and a PhD in History from the University of Cambridge. So, you know, she's a bit of an underachiever, and I believe that she's going to be delivering her address today in English. But she's written an illustrated children's book. She's the author, I won't even try and pronounce that, she might talk about it. She's written a trilogy of the English Reformation, which I'm sure our Catholic friends here today on my board will appreciate. She's currently on the advisory committee of the National Archives and also... Oh, she was sacked. She was sacked. Breaking news, folks. Like all good Conservatives. She was sacked from the National Archives, which is such a shame. She's also a member of History Reclaimed, counter-offensive against fake history, comprising a group of more than 40 senior UK and Anglosphere academics. Bella is a regular contributor to The Spectator, The Sun Herald, The Daily Telegraph, The Australian, and appears regularly on Sky News. Would you please give Dr. Bella dAbrera a big welcome?
Whose mouth is that high?
No, I
Okay, let's get that right. Yeah, I wasn't quite sacked. My tenure ran out, and I got a call saying thank you for your services, but we'd rather you didn't come back for the next 3 years. Also, I haven't really been on Sky or anything for the last year because I'm actually writing a book. I got a contract with a UK publisher, and I've been writing about the global education crisis. So everything that I'm going to talk about today, you can just transplant to the UK, to the US, to Canada, to New Zealand. It's exactly the same thing, with slight variations depending on which country you're in, but it's definitely something that is being imposed on all children in the West in government schools by the state. So first of all, Lyle, thank you for your kind introduction, and I want to pay tribute to you as just a hero of fighting these terrible wars that we're all sort of suddenly faced with, and that we've been born into this time and we don't really have a choice. But again, we do have a choice. We could not do anything, or we could fight, and you've been battling those drag queens for 6 years. And you know, and all the other things that you do for Australian society. So I just want to pay tribute to you in organising this. And everyone, welcome to, well done on turning up on a sunny Saturday after all the rain that we've had for the last 6 weeks. So I hope that you find this talk informative and interesting, and I have to warn that I might depress you a little bit before morning tea, because it's not a very positive and happy subject, but I do have a bit of hope at the end, so you're not going to go home in total despair. Because when we look honestly at what's happening in Australian classrooms, and I'm really talking about government schools, there are some exceptions, but generally most children are going to these government schools, and it is really grim. So they are really what I will call victims. They're victims of, they're caught up in a vast social experiment that is being led by progressives, utopians, generally, you know, people who are on the left side of politics, who really despise Western civilization, and they have this idea that if they can just tear it down and start again, then we'll somehow greet this brave new world of you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the poor children are caught up in this. They are completely innocent and they have no choice. They're dropped off at these schools in the morning by their parents, many of whom have no idea what's going on. But during the course of the day, of the school day, and of course their entire experience at school from beginning to end, they're just being brainwashed with these terrible, terrible radical ideologies that were dreamt up a long time ago in the universities. So we've got radical gender theory, which everyone here I'm sure is very aware of now. They're being taught constantly that they are to be ashamed of their country, that this country was founded on racism and oppression. They're being taught that they must be ashamed of their ancestors. And of course, they're just absolutely paralyzed with anxiety about climate change. This is all they get: sustainability, climate change, recycling. It's bordering on religious. They all believe it. They all think that they're not going to see adulthood, and they're all falling into this state of despair, which is just so unforgivable. In general, what's happening to them at school is that they're being made angry about the past, bitter about the present, and just terrified of the future. And of course, this is hardly a recipe for success on an individual level or a societal level. Oops. But let's just start with gender ideology quickly, because this is the most disturbing and most corrupting and most apparent ideology that is being taught in schools that we see. And you would have all heard a couple of weeks ago Jacinda Allen talking about how it's fine for 5-year-olds to be taught that they're born with the wrong body parts. And we shouldn't be surprised that this is happening in Victoria, because it's led the way for a long time in this radical ideology with its resilience and respectful relationships program, which has been nearly 10 years now in the schools. So that's a lot of children that have been going through. That's thousands of children, probably millions of children actually. My maths isn't very good, who have been taught that all these basically insane ideas, that gender norms are socially constructed, that you can be born with the wrong body parts, that you can just switch from being a girl to a boy if you feel like it. All these, all this stuff that has come straight out of the twisted minds of academics. So my greatest fear with this is that it is government mandated and government supported. And it doesn't just start at school, it starts in kindergarten. And this is something that a lot of parents still haven't worked out, that when they drop their toddlers off at kindergarten, they are being introduced to radical gender theory, and they're being introduced to it because it is mandated by the government. There is a syllabus, it's called Being, Becoming, Belonging, or the other way around. It's ridiculous, but it doesn't mean anything. But basically it says, and I quote, "Early childhood is a critical time for children to begin understanding and exploring gender." This is 3-year-olds. It says childcare centres should be, quote, "safe spaces where LGBTQI plus children and families feel welcomed, honoured and supported." In the material in this syllabus, they urge educators to, and I quote, "resist heteronormative ways of working and ensure that rainbow families feel a sense of belonging." The Tasmanians are actually worse. The Tasmanians have their own syllabus. Teachers are told that they have to tell the children, quote, "your genitals don't make you a boy or a girl," and that people can be both male, female, both or neither. And then when children say boys are boys and girls are girls, they are meant to be chastised for policing gender and corrected. And then, of course, they have the kind of books that they're reading. They're reading things like Julian is a Mermaid, which teaches that identity is endlessly fluid. They're reading Pink is for Boys, which erases distinctions between the sexes. Another book called Rosa Loves Cars, which dismantles so-called gender stereotypes. And Nothing Alike, which tackles race and stereotyping at story time. So the government will always insist, no, we're not teaching radical gender theory. This is just about respectful relationships. This is about children being nice to each other. They are constantly gaslighting the public, even when it is painfully obvious. When they're telling the children that they can change their biological sex, they talk about, teaching them about things being about, genderqueer and non-binary. It's textbook gender theory, and they keep lying to the public. They keep lying to us and telling it that it's not that. It's deception on a grand scale. We know it, and they know it, but we need every parent in this country to also know it. I don't have much time, so I can't go you could talk about radical gender theory for hours, because it's so horrendous. But the other thing that's happening in the classroom is of course, critical race theory, which again they deny is in the curriculum and in classrooms, because there is no classroom course that says critical race theory, but it's deeply embedded in the national curriculum. It's basically the idea that Australia was founded on white supremacy, and that our entire country and all the systems can only be explained by white supremacy and oppression, and it's a power play between white people and everyone else. And that's how they look at the view of the world, and that's how they're teaching children to look at the world, through race. It's in every subject in the national curriculum, which is hundreds of thousands of pages long. In the health and physical education syllabus, when the children are sort of, playing on the monkey bars or throwing balls to each other, they will be actually, quote, gaining insights into the impact of systemic racism and discrimination it's very badly written in the curriculum. I'll start again. Gain insights into the impact systemic racism and discrimination have had on Australian First Nations people. In Year 9 history, they're taught about potential barriers to equality of access to justice, especially for First Nations Australians. In art, they're talking about First Nations Australian cultures having internationally enshrined rights. And by Year 10, they're basically told that figures like Adam Goodes and Noel Pearson represent active citizenship in the struggle for rights. So basically, the pattern is unmistakable. From foundation to Year 10, they're told that Australia is built on racism, and that Indigenous people are perpetual victims, and that non-Indigenous Australians are beneficiaries of oppression. And of course, this is related to how they're taught history, which is through what we would say a post-colonial lens, and a decolonization lens, which again are just insane ideas that have been dreamt up at the university and somehow have ended up in primary schools in Australia. These ideas came out of American universities, and in 2026, they're deeply embedded in the national curriculum. So when it comes to history, they're told, of course, that the arrival of the first fleet in 1788 was an invasion, and that invasion unleashed dispossession, massacres, and genocide on their population. This is the only story they get for the whole way through. And again, the purveyors of the curriculum and educators will always say, no, they're taught a balanced view, but there is no single mention of anything positive about Australian history in the curriculum. It is astonishing. And we all know of the stories of children coming home from school in tears because they've been told that the white people stole black babies, or their ancestors were, killed people, or there's this constant guilt, there's this terrible burden that is being put on these small children's shoulders about the actions of of people who lived and died 250 years ago, who they weren't even related to. This is just cruelty. It's cruelty. They're coming home in tears. I won't go through the detail of the national curriculum. You can, if you can be bothered, you can read it through and look at the history syllabus, and you can see how many times they mention invasion and genocide and dispossession and starvation and wars and stolen generations, and it's just this constant barrage of negativity. And of course, we don't want to whitewash our history, but you need to have some balance. This is the story that Lyle told about his grandfather and how they started from nothing and just created this amazing life. They are never taught this. It is just so wrong. Sorry, I've got a page out of order. Then, of course, they've got the climate change, which I alluded to earlier, which is just endless, again, the endless message of the world's going to end, you're never going to get to adulthood, so why bother? And of course, this is going to have a terrible effect on children. There's a worldwide study done by the Lancet a few years ago that showed that 50% of children around the world are really, really struggling. They're being told that we're facing an ecological crisis of our own making, and not even that, their own making. They're being told that when their parents drive their car, when they have hot showers, when they use the toaster too many times, when they don't recycle, when they leave the lights on, this is all culminating in an end-of-the-world scenario. And again, in the curriculum, they never get a balance. They never get perhaps there's another side of the story. Perhaps the sea levels aren't rising, as perhaps not all the ice is melting. Perhaps there are still polar bears. 6-year-olds are being shown pictures of drowning polar bears and being told that their homes are going to just be swamped, that this is a terrible thing. I remember in the 1980s just briefly being terrified of a nuclear war. I think that's what was going on. And I remember the fear as a child, and thankfully it didn't last very long, but they're getting this. This is all they're getting, and I just can't imagine the damage it's doing to them. We're only just working out the anxiety and the actual deep wounds that we're inflicting on these children. So there was an initiative recently, and there's always funny sides to these things. These children were told that they had to participate in a project called Idle Off in Victoria. Did anyone see that? It was dreamt up at Deakin University by some lefty female sociologists or whatever I don't know what their field of study is, but they told children that they needed to start chastising their parents about leaving their engines on too long while they were waiting to be picked up from them at school. So it was called Idle Off, and they spent their days coming up with terrifying posters that they then stuck on the walls of the school to remind their parents that they should turn the engines off. And one was, "Turn your engines off, we're all going to die." This is serious, this is what they're being taught. So of course, literally turning up in the psychologist's office now in floods of tears. The IPA just did a research piece on it, actually, my lovely colleague Claire Rowe, and boy oh boy, she had some flack from her colleagues pointing out that this is going on. She's a clinician. She's been seeing hundreds of children coming through her office now, her waiting rooms, who are coming in tears, saying they can't sleep at night because they keep thinking the sea is going to rise and drown us. They've really got this thing about the sea rising and drowning us here. I don't know where that. It's not. It's. I don't know what they're being taught really. It's clearly about drowning. Another boy she saw was in tears because he was told that the koalas are losing their habitat. And it was his fault because his family keeps driving their car around. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a global problem, and it's not just Australia, but we live here, we are Australians, we've got to deal with the Australian problem. But there's a man in America called Luke Kosiak who's just written a book called Race to the Bottom. And he's gone through, and it really is a race to the bottom here, he's gone through with absolute amazing detail as a journalist into the public school system in America. There are some differences, but it's fairly similar to what's going on here. He has children, and he moved to another state because he thought it would be better. He ended up saying, I can no longer send my children to public schools because it is basically child abuse. And I don't know what else you call it. You're reducing them you're telling them that they're not going to make it to adulthood. You're giving them nothing to hope for. They don't want to have their own children. They're confused about their own biology. They don't know, they can't recognize reality anymore. And this is the main problem with this ideology, is that they can no longer recognize the difference between right and wrong and truth and untruth and what's real and what isn't, because they're being totally rewired and reprogrammed by their teachers, many of whom are well-meaning, and many of whom think that they're doing the right thing because they think they're working towards this world of social justice, of where everything will be perfect and no one will be unequal. There'll be no one, who falls by the wayside. And they're good intentions. We all want a better world, but it's definitely the wrong way of going about it. And I just wanted to quickly talk about how we got here, because I think it's really important, especially in the context of it being a Family First conference, and I think everyone will know the answer, is that the state wants your child, and as a society, we've forgotten who children belong to. We used to know children used to belong to parents. We used to know this. It didn't need to be discussed. It was understood, and it was accepted. Children belong to their parents. The parents were the moral and spiritual guides of their, and provided for their children material until they turned 18 and left home. We've forgotten this, and now we seem to believe that the state is responsible for our children, and a lot of people, whether through circumstance, we can't have, Lyle talked earlier about it's impossible to have a house and raise 2 children on one income. You have to outsource your child now. It's almost impossible to not outsource your child to childcare. and people are very busy and they don't know what is going on in schools, but they have abnegated responsibility and handed their children over to the state. And the state does not love your children like you do. And the state wants a different version of your child. The state doesn't want your child to believe in God. The state doesn't want a cohesive family unit. The state wants your child to be part of it wants your child to be cogs in the machine, in the state machine. And this idea started with Jean-Jacques Rousseau. It started it started 2 centuries ago with this philosopher who said that children should be removed from the corrupting influence of their parents. This is where it all began. This is not novel, this is not new. This has been a long time coming. He said that children were better out of the home because, and especially the mothers. He said that the mothers were the most corrupting influence, and that society needed to begin anew. And the only way that could be done was breaking the bond between the parent and the child. What have we got today? We've got those bonds being broken. That there's no transparency. Parents don't know what's going on in their schools. They're not told when their children are being socially transitioned. There's a lot of secrecy. Parents have lost that bond, and children are being turned against their parents as well. The state's come in and going, well, we care about you, especially if you're socially transitioning. Your parents, they don't love you, but the state loves you. Back to Rousseau quickly. I don't know if you know, but he abandoned every one of his 5 children and sent them off to a foundling hospital for certain death in Paris. So this is the man who's shaped progressive education, and he left his children to die. The other man that has shaped what we're going through now, the idea that the state owns your children, was John Dewey in America, who actually went to the Soviet Union for inspiration on education. He toured communist Russia and praised it as admirable, praised the schools as admirable. He loved what the Bolsheviks were doing in the classroom, which was to break down the old order to produce the new Soviet man. We've got new men, we've got new people coming out of our system in 2026, and they're not well adjusted, and they are not the kind of person who will be able to build a society that we need to regenerate. But I told you I wasn't going to leave you in total despair, because Australian parents are waking up. They're waking up really, really quickly. Happened after COVID, during COVID, when the classroom materials came home and people suddenly said, "You're teaching them what?" And as we know, the numbers of homeschooling are going up. They're going up everywhere. They're going up massively in the UK, massively in Australia. In America, it's 6% of Americans homeschool their children. It's still small here. I think it's 1.8% here and 1.6% in the UK, but that's still a lot. They're safe. They're safe at home. Do you remember homeschooling used to be the crazy ones? It's completely reversed. Now you're getting the sane, clever, well-informed, and well-adjusted children that are coming out of homeschooling. And the other thing, of course, is that we're building new schools here, the classical schools. We're getting the St. John Henry Newman School in Brisbane opening next year. And there's the Hertford College here in New South Wales. There's little micro schools. I visited one in Perth, which was amazing, where they do a hybrid between homeschooling and homeschooling and a little school three or 4 times a week, and the children were just delightful. It was just so wonderful to meet them. So there's hope, because you don't need the majority to effect change. It's never getting the majority anyway. It's going to be special. And it's going to be a minority of people who who understand what the battle is and have the values and that we know we need to win this fight. And we are seeing changes amongst the young. I know there's no stats in Australia, but in England in the last 5 years, the 18 to 24s are just flocking back to church. They are. They've realised, they're waking up to the fact that they're being thrust into this world of disorder and chaos and insanity, and they are looking for order and chaos, order and sanity, and they're finding that in the churches. I'm sure it's happening here. No one's done a survey, but it is, and I think anecdotally I've heard a lot of congregations have a lot of young people coming through now. Of course they're going to look for an alternative. If you've got any brains at all, you can see what's going on. They're weary. They're weary of the endless labels of being told that their very existence is oppressive, and young men especially. Imagine being told all the time that you're toxic. I didn't even get onto the toxic masculinity stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff. So again, I think there is. We need to be very aware of how bad the system is, but we can't despair, because the young people are waking up to the indoctrinators. They're waking up to what is being done, and they're rebelling against it. And that should give us all in this room very real hope, because that's hope for our future, of our children, and for the future of this country. So we should be cheered, and I'm sure the numbers will keep rising. The worse things get in schools, the more people will rebel against it. That's it, really. The very brief overview of the horrific things that are going on in schools. I think the best thing you can do is homeschool or start your own school these days. That's my advice.
Bella, thank you so much for that. That's a very illuminating talk. I think what I draw from that is that our kids are being taught that their biology is illegitimate, that their nation is illegitimate, the way we live our lives and run our homes is illegitimate. So Bella, thank you for that. It's deeply distressing, but we've got to be woken up to it. And of course, as a political movement, we hope we can be part of the solution to that. But it starts with being aware of the absolute rubbish that our kids are being taught. And this is going to it is having horrendous consequences. So Bella, thank you for giving up your time today. We really appreciate it. We know you're a very busy person, and we've just got a small token of appreciation for you. Please thank Dr. Bella dAbrera.